My name is Adrian Osei. I am 29 years old. And the Tuesday evening my mother added me to the wrong group chat was the evening I finally understood that the person a family most relies on is rarely the person that family most considers. The notification came in at 8:11 p.m. My mother had been trying to add my Aunt Lorraine to a group thread she was putting together for Thanksgiving logistics, who was bringing what time people were arriving, whether my cousin Darnell was coming with his new girlfriend. My mother's phone contact list is organized by first name, and my name and Lorraine's are 2 entries apart. She added me instead. I did not realize immediately that I had been added to something I was not meant to see. The first few messages looked like ordinary coordination, someone asking about parking, someone confirming a dish. Then I scrolled up to the beginning of the thread the way you do when you want context, and the beginning of the thread was not logistics. The beginning of the thread was my Aunt Renee, 3 days earlier on a Saturday night. Can we talk about Adrian? Every year it's something. I'm exhausted. My mother. I know. I don't know what to do anymore. My Aunt Lorraine. Just don't invite her. Tell her you're keeping it small. My mother. She'll know. Renee. So she'll know. She ruins everything anyway. Don't invite her this year. Lorraine. For laughing emojis. Nothing else. My Uncle Bart. Agreed. Easier without the drama. My mother, after a pause of 47 minutes according to the timestamps. Okay. I'll figure out what to say. I read it from the Saturday messages through to the Tuesday logistics thread my mother had accidentally added me to. I read the whole thing without stopping. Then I set my phone on the kitchen table in front of me, face up, screen still lit. I sat there for a while. I did not send a message into the thread. I did not call my mother. I did not call Renee or Lorraine or Bart. I got up from the table, walked to the sink, and ran the cold water for a moment without doing anything with it. Then I turned it off and walked back to the table and opened my banking app. The scheduled payment was visible on the main screen, $2,114, set to process on the 23rd of the month. 4 days away. What none of them knew, what my mother had never told Renee or Lorraine or Bart, what she had perhaps half forgotten herself in the way you half forget the mechanics of something that simply runs, was that the $2,114 came from my account. Let me tell you how that came to be, because the origin of it is important to understanding what I decided to do next. My mother has owned her house on Clement Street since I was 11 years old. She bought it after my parents separated, in the particular determination of a woman who wanted her children to have one address that was not subject to anyone else's decisions. The mortgage at the time was manageable on her salary. She works as a medical records coordinator at a regional hospital, a job she has held for 19 years with the kind of institutional knowledge that makes her indispensable without making her particularly well compensated. When interest rates adjusted on her loan 3 years ago, the monthly payment went up. Not catastrophically from $1,780 to $2,114, but enough that the math stopped working the way it had worked before. My mother did not tell me this directly. She mentioned in passing on a Sunday phone call that things were a little tight right now and she was looking at her options. I asked her what her options were. She listed 3 things, none of which were workable in the time frame she needed. I asked her what the new payment was. She told me. I did the arithmetic in my head against what I knew of her salary, her expenses, and the cost of the things she did not mention in passing, my younger brother Marcus's car insurance, which she still carried even though Marcus was 24, the water bill on a house with old pipes, the prescription copays that had increased when her plan changed. I told her I would cover the difference. She said, "Adrian, you don't have to." I said, "I know. I want to." This was not entirely accurate. I did not want to in the way you want something you have chosen freely. I wanted to in the way you want to stop a hole from getting larger, not out of enthusiasm, but out of the practical recognition that the alternative was worse. My mother said thank you. She said she would pay me back when things settled. I told her not to worry about it. I set up the transfer. That was 26 months before the Tuesday of the group chat. In 26 months, my mother had not paid me back, and I had not asked her to, and the transfer had processed on the 23rd of every month without interruption. My mother knew I was helping. She did not know the exact amount or that I was covering the entire payment. I had set it up to pay the servicer directly, and she had, I think, constructed a mental accounting in which my contribution was partial and supplementary, a buffer on top of her own payments, rather than the whole of it. I had not corrected that impression. I am not certain why, exactly, except that correcting it would have required a conversation about money that my mother and I had never learned to have, and I had not wanted to make her feel the specific way that knowing the full amount would have made her feel. After the Tuesday of the group chat, I thought about that decision differently. I work in supply chain operations for a regional distribution company. I have worked there since I was 24, starting as a logistics coordinator and moving into a planning role 2 years ago. My job is to understand how systems work under normal conditions and identify where they become fragile under pressure. I think about dependency chains, what relies on what happens when a single point of failure stops functioning, how long the downstream effects take to materialize. I had never applied that framework to my own family before Tuesday. I did on Wednesday. On Wednesday morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to my company's employee assistance program, which offers a free consultation with a financial counselor. I had never used it before. The counselor's name was Mr. Asani, and he walked me through what I already knew but wanted to confirm: what happens when a mortgage payment is missed, what the servicer's notification timeline looks like, what the formal process is between a missed payment and any structural consequence to the property. He confirmed what I had calculated. He was professional and unhurried, and did not ask me why I was asking. The second call was to an attorney named Claudette Voss, who had been referred to me 3 years earlier by a colleague who had used her for a lease dispute. I had saved her number, without ever using it. I called her Wednesday afternoon and explained the situation: 26 months of mortgage payments, no written agreement, direct payment to the servicer, no record of the arrangement beyond my bank statements. She asked the same questions Rosalind had asked Celeste, except this is not Celeste's story, and Claudette Voss asked them in her own way, which was faster and more direct. She asked whether I had the transfer records. I did, 26 statements, each one showing the $2,114 transfer on or near the 23rd. She asked what outcome I was looking for. I said I want 2 things. I want a written record of what I have contributed, in a form that my mother has to acknowledge and sign. And I want to understand what my options are if I decide to stop. She said the record was straightforward: a family financial contribution acknowledgement, similar to instruments used in estate planning contexts, documenting the payment history and establishing the arrangement's existence and terms. She said my options regarding stopping were simple. I could stop at any time, as the payments came from my account, and I had no obligation absent a written agreement. The only constraint was practical. The servicer would notify my mother of a missed payment within a standard window, and the formal process from there followed its own calendar. I asked her to prepare the acknowledgement. She said she would have a draft by Friday. I did not contact my mother between Tuesday and Friday. She called me on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., not about the chat because she did not yet know I had been added to it. She called about Thanksgiving in the tone she uses when she is delivering prepared language. I've been thinking about this year. We're going to keep it really small, just the immediate family. I hope that's okay. I said, "That's fine, Mom." She said, "You're not upset?" I said, "No." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I'm sure. I have plans." I did not have plans. But I said it in a tone that closed the subject, and she moved on, and we talked for 4 more minutes about nothing in particular, and I said goodbye, and she said goodbye, and I put the phone down. I want to say something about that call because I think it matters. My mother was not a cruel woman calling to confirm my exclusion. She was a woman who had agreed to something in a group thread 3 days earlier and was now executing the softest version of it she could manage, hoping I would make it easy for her. That is its own kind of thing. It is not the same as cruelty, and it is not the same as innocence. It is the thing that sits between them which is sometimes harder to name. I made it easy for her. I said I had plans. I did not make it easy for her because I wanted to protect her. I made it easy for her because I had already decided what I was going to do, and the Wednesday call was not the conversation I intended to have. Claudette Voss sent the draft acknowledgement Friday morning. I read it twice, confirmed the payment history totals, 26 payments of $2,114, total of $54,964, and told her it was accurate. She said she would finalize it Monday. On Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, I went to a friend's dinner. There were 9 people at the table, none of them related to me. I ate well. I helped clear the plates. I drove home at 10 o'clock and went to bed. On Friday, the 23rd of the month, I opened my banking app at 7:45 a.m. The scheduled payment was there. $2,114. Pending. I sat with it for a few minutes. Then I canceled it. I want to be precise about this decision because I think precision matters here. I canceled the payment not as punishment and not as strategy. I canceled it because I had spent 26 months making an arrangement work that had never been formally acknowledged, and I had decided that the next payment, if there was a next payment, would be made as a deliberate and documented choice, not as a default. The cancellation was not the point. The conversation was the point. The cancellation was simply what forced the conversation onto a timeline I controlled rather than one I was always subject to. I knew what the servicer's notification window looked like. I had confirmed it with Mr. Asante on Wednesday. My mother would receive a courtesy notice within 5 to 7 business days of the missed payment. Today was Friday. That put the notice at the following Thursday or Friday at the latest, the week after Thanksgiving, when the holiday had cleared and attention had returned to ordinary things. I went to work. I ate lunch. I drove home. I made dinner. I watched something on television and went to bed. The servicer's notice arrived in my mother's email on the following Wednesday, 6 days after the missed payment, within the window Mr. Asani had described. I know it arrived Wednesday because my mother called me Wednesday evening at 7:03 p.m., and the first thing she said when I answered was, "Adrian, I got something from the mortgage company." I said, "What did it say?" She said, "It says the November payment wasn't received." But I thought a pause. "Adrian, have you been paying this directly?" I said, "Yes." The line was quiet. "The whole payment?" "Yes." Since the adjustment," I said. 26 months. Another silence. Different from the first one, longer, and with a different quality. The way the silence after an acknowledgement differs from the silence after a question. My mother said, "I didn't know it was the whole thing." I said, "I know." "Adrian." "Mom," I said, "I need to meet with you this week. I have a document I want to go over with you, and I want Aunt Renee and Aunt Lorraine there, if that's possible. I know Thanksgiving just passed. I know the timing is what it is. But I need to do this before the December payment cycle." A long pause. "What kind of document?" "A financial acknowledgement," I said. "It documents what I've been contributing and formalizes the arrangement going forward." My attorney prepared it. Another pause. My mother said, "Your attorney?" "Yes." "Adrian, is this because of Thanksgiving?" "Because if I hurt you..." "It's not about Thanksgiving," I said. "It's about making sure the arrangement we've had for 2 years is on paper. That's all." This was not entirely true, but it was not entirely false either. The arrangement needed to be on paper regardless of the group chat. The group chat had simply removed my willingness to delay the conversation further. My mother said she would make it happen. She called back 40 minutes later and said Saturday at 2 o'clock at her house. Renee would be there. Lorraine had a conflict but could join by phone. Bart would not be coming, which I had not expected and did not push. I said Saturday at 2 was fine. I arrived at my mother's house on Clement Street at 1:55. Claudette Voss was with me, carrying a folder. I had my own folder, 26 bank statements, organized by month, paper-clipped in groups of 6. My mother answered the door. She looked at the folders and then at Claudette and then at me, and something in her face settled into a particular arrangement that I did not try to read. Renee was already at the kitchen table. She looked at Claudette the way people look at attorneys they were not expecting, a brief adjustment of posture, a stillness around the eyes. Lorraine's voice came through my mother's phone, propped against the sugar bowl on the table. We sat down. Claudette introduced herself and explained the purpose of the meeting in the same terms she had described to me on Wednesday, a family financial contribution acknowledgement, documenting an informal payment arrangement that had been operating without a written record for 26 months. Renee said, "What payment arrangement?" I placed the folder in the center of the table. "I've been covering my mother's mortgage payment in full since her rate adjusted," I said. 26 months. Every payment. Directly to the servicer. The table was quiet. My mother's hands, which had been folded on the table, moved apart. She put one hand flat on the wood and left it there. Renee looked at my mother. "You didn't tell us that." My mother did not respond to that immediately. Lorraine's voice from the phone. "Wait, Adrian has been paying your mortgage?" "Yes," I said. The acknowledgement documents the full payment history and the total amount contributed. It also establishes that any future change to the arrangement requires 30 days written notice to all parties. Claudette slid the acknowledgement across the table to my mother. My mother picked it up and read it. Her eyes moved slowly down the first page. She turned to the second page and stopped at the line that showed the total, $54,964. She set it down. Renee said, "Adrian, I had no idea." "I know," I said. "I'm not asking anyone to apologize. I'm asking for a signed record. But the timing, right after Thanksgiving. The payment missed on the 23rd, I said. The servicer's notice went out Wednesday. This meeting needed to happen before the December cycle. The timing is what the timing is." Renee was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did we add you to?" I looked at her. She said, "On Tuesday, before Thanksgiving, your mother was trying to add Lorraine." "Renee," my mother said. "Quiet." A warning register. Renee stopped. I said, "You don't have to explain it." The room held itself, very still. Lorraine's voice did not come through the phone for a moment. Then my mother picked up the pen. She signed the acknowledgement without looking up from it. She pushed it across to Renee. Renee read the first paragraph, then signed below my mother's name. Claudette witnessed both signatures. She would file a copy with her office and mail certified copies to all parties within the week. My mother said, "What happens now?" I said, "I'll make the December payment. I'll make payments through March. After that, I want to revisit the arrangement and talk about what the long-term plan looks like, whether that's you covering it again, whether it's a formal contribution I continue, whether we restructure something. But I need it in writing, and I need everyone who has a voice in this family to know it exists." Lorraine said, through the phone, "That's fair." No one disagreed. I did not stay for coffee. I thanked my mother for hosting the meeting. I said I would call during the week. I walked out to the car with Claudette, and we sat for a moment before she started the engine. She said, "You handled that well." I said, "Thank you for coming." She said she would send the filed copies by Friday. She dropped me at my apartment 20 minutes later. I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and made dinner. The December payment processed on the 23rd, as I had said it would. My mother texted me that evening, a single message that said, "Thank you." I replied, "Of course." That was the extent of it. In January, my mother called me on a Sunday, which she does most Sundays. We talked for 31 minutes. She did not mention the acknowledgement. She did not mention Thanksgiving. She mentioned that Marcus had finally sorted out his car registration, which had been overdue since the summer, and that a neighbor had a new dog she was learning to tolerate, and that she had started watching a show someone at work had recommended, and wasn't sure yet whether it was worth continuing. I told her to give it 3 episodes before deciding. She said that was probably right. Renee called me in February. The call was 12 minutes long. She said she wanted to clear the air. She said she had not known about the mortgage and that knowing it now had changed how she thought about some things, and she was not sure exactly what to do with that, but she wanted to say it directly rather than not say it. I told her I appreciated that. She said, "The message I sent, about you ruining things." I said, "I read it." She said, She stopped. "I was tired and I took it out on you, and it wasn't accurate." I said, "I know it wasn't." She said, "I don't know if that's enough." I said, "It's a start." She said, "Okay." We said goodbye. I went back to the report I had been working on before her call and finished it before lunch. The March payment will be the last one I make under the current arrangement. I have a meeting with Claudette scheduled for the second week of March to go over the options. Whether my mother can resume the full payment with her adjusted salary, whether a partial contribution from me makes sense on a documented basis, whether there are refinancing options worth exploring given where rates currently sit. I have not pre-decided the outcome of that meeting. What I have decided is that nothing that comes out of it will be informal. Whatever we arrive at will be on paper, witnessed, and filed. That is not a condition I am imposing out of distrust. It is a condition I am imposing because I have learned, in 26 months of automatic transfers, that informal arrangements are only stable until they are not, and the moment they become unstable is never the moment you would have chosen to have the conversation. There is a sentence I have been turning over since February, since Renee said, "I don't know if that's enough," and I said, "It's a start." I meant it both ways. I meant it as reassurance that a start is more than nothing, and I was not requiring a complete accounting before I would continue a relationship. And I meant it as a statement of fact, that it was a start, not a completion, and that the distance between where we were and where I wanted us to be was real, and not going to close in a single 12-minute call. I do not know how to close that distance. I have not found a formula for it. What I have found is that the acknowledgement on file with Claudette Voss's office is a more reliable foundation than goodwill alone, and that building on a reliable foundation is the only kind of building I am currently willing to do. The Clement Street house is still standing. The payments are current. My mother and I talk on Sundays. That is where things are. The question I have been sitting with, and I want to know if you have ever been in a version of this room, is this. When my mother picked up the pen at the kitchen table and signed without looking up before Renee had finished deciding whether to ask anything else, and I watched her hand move across the page and did not say a single word, what was happening in that silence? I have my answer. I'd like to know yours. Leave it in the comments below. If this one found you, subscribe. A new story every week, and every one of them is about the work that goes unseen until the day the payment doesn't clear. I'll see you in the next one.